If you are looking for some new books to add to your TBR, books that feel magical and whimsical, maybe a little bit cozy, maybe a little bit adventurous, stories that are going to completely transport you to a new world, atmospheric writing, beautiful settings, today I'm going to be sharing with you my top 10 favorite whimsical book recommendations. Let's go ahead and get started. Make sure to get cozy, grab a drink, grab a snack, grab a blanket, and let's get into talking about my top 10 whimsical book recommendations. I do have a couple honorable mentions as well that we won't talk about as much, but I feel like I should also mention if you are wanting to add even more books to your TBR. And also please let me know down below what your whimsical book recommendations are, because I'm always looking to read more. But the first book I have to recommend to you is a classic, a middle grade classic. That is of course Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. This book I would definitely say is heavy on the middle grade side, but it is the type of story that I think is perfect for everybody, no matter who you are, no matter what your age is. This book follows around our main character Sophie, who ends up getting a little bit of a curse from a witch. She's cursed to become basically a little grandma. She leaves home, and on her quest to potentially break her curse, she meets the very moody and grumpy wizard Howl. She ends up living with him, kind of finding a little bit of friendship and family while also trying to break her curse, going on different little adventures and quests. And it is truly so charming and so much fun. This is definitely on the more kind of silly and ridiculous side of things. I have some more, I guess, serious books on this recommendation list. This is not serious at all. This is very fun, very silly, and I think this one is such a beautiful story because it is so much fun and definitely an adventure to read it, but also it does have a bit of a heartwarming charmingness to it. I would recommend this book to you if you love reading about found family, unexpected friendship, fun little quests, and beautiful settings, a very kind of summery atmosphere. And then of course, potentially the best part about reading this book is there is a beautiful, beautiful Studio Ghibli movie for you to watch afterwards. I actually read this book after I had watched the Ghibli movie, and it was such a transportive experience being able to read it and picture all of the scenes in my head. The movie has some of the most gorgeous and stunning animation scenes, and also a really, really wonderful soundtrack as well. The movie does kind of deviate plot-wise a little bit from the book, but the overall energy and story, heartwarmingness, and whimsy is the same. So if you loved one, I think you would also love the other one. Overall, just a beautiful, well-rounded story and perfect for anybody who's just wanting something a bit fun. My next recommendation for you is of course Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. I could not make this video without recommending one of my favorite books of all time, and I think one of the most whimsical and cozy stories I have ever read. This book follows around our main character Emily, who is a professor at Cambridge in dryadology, which is basically just the study of fairies. In this first book, she ends up traveling to this kind of cold, remote island to get all the last bit of research that she needs to complete and publish her Encyclopedia of Fairies. She ends up being joined by her kind of nemesis friend, colleague Wendell, gets to know all the local villagers and all the fae of the area. I would recommend this book to you if you love fun, quirky bookish, a little bit antisocial characters. Emily is definitely way more of the scholarly type. If you love nature walks and being outside, a bit of a naturalism, natural history kind of vibe as well. This takes place in 1910. I recently reread this book at the beginning of the year, and it truly just felt like a hug being in this story again. I'm not sure what it is. The whole series is really good. I think the second one is potentially my favorite, but there is just something so comforting about this first book. It takes place in winter, and you get all these beautiful scenes of just like snuggling up in a cabin by the fireside, drinking some warm tea, coming in from a long day, adventuring in the woods, and it is just so snuggly and warm. This one definitely does have a very big adventure side to it, especially as the series goes on, so I think that it's perfect if you are kind of wanting to get into cozy fantasy. This to me is truly one of the most perfect books ever written, and if you love all things fairies and nature and journaling and academia, then I would definitely recommend this book to you. It is one of my absolute favorites. Another one of my favorite books of all time time is Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater. This story follows around our main character, Dora, who is cursed when she is young by a fairy, and as a result she only has half a soul. She basically just kind of experiences emotions quite differently than other people. She ends up moving to London for the season with her cousin. This is kind of a Regency, Bridgerton-esque setting. She and her cousin are basically on the lookout to find husbands and just enjoy the season for what it is. She ends up running into our other main character, who is the kind of court sorcerer. They end up striking a bit of a deal. He agrees to help Dora with her curse situation, and the story just kind of goes from there. To me, this felt like such a unique book because on one hand, it was such a magical read. If you love historical fiction, especially Bridgerton-esque and Regency settings, this is perfect for you. The descriptions of the beautiful ball gowns, the balls themselves, tea parties, the Regency style, dialogue, and banter, it was all immaculate. It was also so magical too. There's the whole kind of fairy aspect to the story, but also the book itself feels like a fairy tale. You wouldn't expect it from a book like this that's quite short and very kind of whimsical and silly at times, but truly at its heart, this is a story about kindness. Dora and Elias are some of the most kind characters I have ever read about. Olivia Atwater has said that Dora's whole curse half a soul situation is a neurodivergency representation, something about reading about a character who, despite her struggles to kind of connect with people emotionally and understand people emotionally, seeing how kind she is and how compassionate she is, how deeply she strives to help other people, it's just the most beautiful, touching thing. I want to read you guys a quote from this book that I think just encaptures just the general theme of it and just how beautiful the story is. There is such a thing as evil in this world. It does not help to look away from it. It does not even help necessarily to look right at it. But sometimes when you cannot force the world to come to its senses, you must settle only for wiping away some of the small evils in front of you. This is the perfect book to read if you are looking for a story that is glamorous and whimsical, but also is going to touch you, and these characters are going to stick with you. And it's just one of my favorite books of all time. I'm definitely due for a reread of this actually. This book is also part of a series, and I have not read all 3 of them. It's a little bit more of like a connected standalone situation. But I do want to quickly also talk about the second one, 10,000 Stitches, because I also loved this one and highly recommend this one again if you were looking for whimsical stories. I don't think this one I loved quite as much as Half a Soul, but it was still such an enjoyable read. This is a Cinderella retelling. There's a bit more of a fairy aspect to this one than in Half a Soul, I feel like, but also the story itself is a fairy tale. While the first book kind of sheds a little bit of light on the workhouse situations in London at the time, this book talks more about the mistreatment and poor conditions that a lot of the servants during this time period experienced. And again, it's just really refreshing to read a story that is very beautiful and whimsical and fun, but also has a greater message to it. I love anything Cinderella related, and I really enjoyed the approach Olivia Atwater took with this one. It was also just very magical, lots of fairy settings, again had that charmingness that Half a Soul did. Another one of my favorites. This was my favorite book of last year, and I think one of the most whimsical and magical adventure stories I have ever read. That is of course Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. This book follows around a boy who has a little bit of a hard life, but he grows up as a librarian's apprentice, and his biggest dream in life is to one day visit the magical and mythical, mysteriously disappearing city with a name that nobody can remember. He studies as much as he can to learn about the city. It's his biggest dream to one day visit, and so what happens if one day he gets the opportunity to maybe do just that? This is definitely the type of book that I don't think you should know much about going into it. It is the type of story that is so transportive and cinematic. Reading this, you will literally feel like you are watching a movie in your head. This is definitely a book if you love stories and fairy tales, if you love books about characters who love stories and fairy tales, and also just a world that is so rich in its culture and folklore and mythology. This world just feels so grand and beautifully thought out, almost like it's from a dream. I genuinely have no idea how Laini Taylor thought of such a whimsical and creative story. The second book, Muse of Nightmares, this is a duology, just kind of expands upon that and makes the world even bigger, starts to connect things from the first book, and it was one of the most fun reading experiences I have ever had in my entire life. The characters in the story are also some of the sweetest characters I have ever read about. They're both very gentle and very kind and just form very sweet friendships. There's a lot of really great character dynamics in the story. It is just so adventurous, and I don't even know how to describe this book. Just read it. If you love stories, you have to read it. My next recommendation is a book that I actually just read, and that is Wildwood Dancing by Juliet Marillier. This is the other middle grade book on this list, though I think it's a little bit more YA, I would say, but also just the type of story that is perfect for everybody. This is a historical fairy tale inspired 12 Dancing Princesses story. It takes place in Transylvania, I want to say around the 16th century. We follow around these 5 sisters who every full moon, via a magical portal in their room, travel to an enchanting magical world of fairies. Their father ends up moving away for the winter, and things kind of start to go wrong. There is a little bit of a mystery that we're kind of wrapped up in. Lots of things going wrong with their home establishment and also in the world of the fairies. And so our main character, Jenna, one of the sisters, ends up going on a bit of a fairy mystery quest of sorts to solve all these different problems and restore some peace to the land. If you love fairy tales, you have to read this book. There is actually a second fairy tale that is included in the retelling, kind of merged with the 12 Dancing Princesses, and I'm not going to tell you what it is because it definitely is a spoiler, I think, but it just made the story feel so much more fun and layered with a character that you did not quite expect. Also, if you love stories about sisters, I think it was such a beautiful thing to read about the bond that these sisters have, the love they have for each other. I don't know, it was just very touching. I don't have any sisters, but I love to read stories about sisters. There's something very special about it. And then I think the strength of this book is it really just encaptures that feeling of childlike wonder, reading fairy tales as a kid, watching Disney movies, playing in the woods, pretending that you're in a fairy forest. Like, this book really captures that almost naive kind of curiosity and wonder and magic that comes with being a kid, and it does it in such a beautiful way with such an addicting plot. I honestly really loved it. I'm looking forward to reading more Juliet Marillier books now. It's definitely one of the most whimsical stories I've read in a while. I also just this morning actually finished reading the second book in the series, Cybele's Secrets, which follows around one of the other sisters, and it's a very different setting, a very different story, but so much fun as well. I wouldn't say quite as like whimsical, magical, fairy tale-esque as the first one, but very adventure-filled, mysteries, hidden artifacts, pirates and trading and seafaring, and I don't know which one I liked more. They were both so much fun to read, and I would highly recommend both of them. My next whimsical recommendation is another one of my favorite books that I read last year, and I think one of the most perfect fairy tale stories. This is Where the Dark Stands Still by A.B. Poranek. This story follows around our main character Liska, who travels into a demon-infested woods in seek of a magical flower. When she gets there, she ends up meeting the kind of demon of the wood, and they end up striking a deal. She ends up living with him for a year, and we just follow them around as they are trying to figure out what's going on with the forest, going on these little adventures, and it is just the most magical story. A lot of people say that this book has a bit of a Howl and Sophie Studio Ghibli feel to it, and I definitely agree with that as well. It has some really beautiful imagery of the forest, a big fairy tale feel. This book also takes place in, I believe, a historical version of Poland. It has very rich Eastern European mythology, which was so much fun to read about. I love learning about different parts of the world and different mythologies through reading these types of stories, and you can really tell the love that A.B. Poranek poured into the story with all of the folk tales and mythology. If you love sentient houses, demon cats, hidden magical libraries, a bit of a creepy, alive feeling forest, a lot of nature imagery, and a touch of like gothic sadness as well, then this is definitely the book for you. I do think that this book leans a little bit more on the sad side towards the end rather than kind of the silly, goofy, fun books that I've also recommended in this video. This one has a touch of sadness, but it honestly only makes the story more beautiful and more impactful. Next up, we have a book that I actually read a couple of years ago, but I would still consider to be one of my favorites of all time, and that is Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. If you love libraries and books and kind of wizard, grimoire type things, then this is definitely the book for you. Our main character, Elizabeth, is a librarian's apprentice. She has completely grown up in a library, and one day when something happens at her library, she ends up moving to the city. She meets this grumpy sorcerer guy, and they end up working together to solve a bit of a magical mystery that's happening in the government of the city. This book is also oftentimes compared to Howl's Moving Castle with our other main character, Nathaniel Hawthorne, and I definitely agree with that one. The character dynamic in this book is so much fun. I would recommend this book to you if you love libraries and library settings and books. The descriptions are so immersive. You feel like you are there alongside the characters in these beautiful libraries with all these books. The books in the story are also like sentient. They have like personalities, they can get allergies and sick, and it's honestly just so much fun. Definitely on the more ridiculous side of the fantasy in the sense that some of the scenes are quite fun and a little bit ridiculous, but the story itself definitely does have depth. There's also a demon cat in this book, which was so much fun to read as well. So honestly, it just has all the fun things. There's also a little novella that comes after this book, and I loved that novella so much. It made me so happy to read. These are some of my favorite characters. Margaret Rogerson has just such a very almost lyrical way of writing, but in just a very kind of descriptive way that's gonna make you feel like you are there alongside with the characters. Another book that I'm definitely due for a reread because I loved it so much the first time, and talking about it now is making me want to read it again very soon. Something a little bit different, but so magical. This is The Enchanted Lives of Celeste Artois by Graudin. This book is for all of the Paris lovers out there, which I definitely am. I love anything set in Paris, even better if it's historical Paris, even better if it's a magical version of Paris, and that is exactly what this book is. This is set right before World War I. Our main character Celeste is actually a bit of a con artist. She's a bit of a thief of sorts, and one day she meets somebody who shows her that Paris actually has a whole magical side to it. If you love that kind of almost like Erin Morgenstern style of book where the plot itself is a little bit complicated, it doesn't fully make sense at times, it's kind of all these different directions it's going in with different characters and maybe some plot holes, you're gonna be kind of confused, but it is just the most magical and atmospheric thing you will ever read. If you like that style of book, then this is definitely for you. The descriptions of the magical version of Paris are just so whimsical. They feel like part of a dream, part of a child's imagination, things that are just so overly whimsical. If you like that kind of stuff, then this is definitely the book for you. It's also such a love letter to Paris. It describes Paris in such a beautiful way with these very recognizable landmarks. It feels like you are there. It feels like you are traveling as you read this book. But there's also found family in this. There's also a bit of a World War I theme, I guess, towards the end of the story. Obviously, with all magic comes a dark side, so there's that discussion as well. But if you love Paris, if you love Erin Morgenstern, definitely check this one out. Okay, the final book that I have on my main list of favorites is A River Enchanted by Rebecca Ross. I have read quite a few Rebecca Ross books now. She's definitely one of my favorite authors, and I think all of her books have a very magical element to them, but this story in particular is so whimsical in a very unique way, and I have not quite found a book that makes me feel the way I did when I read this one. In this book, we follow our main character Jack, who one day is sent a mysterious letter to return to his magical home island. When he gets there, he ends up realizing that some things are going wrong with the island. There's a bit of a mystery going on in relation to the kind of opposing clan on the island, as well as things going wrong with the nature spirits. This is a book for the people who just love nature. There are the most beautiful descriptions of the mountainside, the seaside, meadows, and forests, and the whole kind of magical element to the story are the nature spirits. This is a Scottish-inspired story as well, so the setting was so transportive to read, but also getting to learn about the different mythology and just culture as well was really special. So if you love Scottish folklore and Scottish-inspired settings, this is also definitely a book for you. The second book, A Fire Endless, also gets a little bit more political as well in a really fun and interesting way. So if you like that kind of family dynamics, princesses and opposing kingdoms and espionage and poison, that kind of thing, this book also has a ton of that. There was also something so cozy about the story, just the most comforting, huggable descriptions of these little cottages that the characters live in, knitting by the fireside, eating a bowl of soup after a long day in the woods. It feels like a hug in that way. There's also definitely a bit of a small town feel to the story as well, given that the story takes place on an island. Everybody kind of knows each other, and so it has that kind of familiarity as well. This book also just had some of the most mature and just genuinely good and likable characters characters. There's kind of 4 main characters that you follow around, and none of them are perfect per se. They definitely make a lot of mistakes, but they are just all so kind to each other, just very, very mature. If you're looking for a book with characters that you're going to like and you're going to root for and you're going to be happy for, this is definitely the type of book for that as well. Also, look at the beautiful artwork on this edition of it. I think this is potentially my favorite character artwork I have ever seen. So those are my top 10 favorite whimsical book recommendations. I do have a couple other ones though that I quickly want to go through, a little bit of a rapid fire if you're wanting more books to add to your TBR. Obviously, I can't talk about whimsical fantasy without mentioning Erin Morgenstern herself. I feel like is the inspiration for a lot of these books and kind of created this whole like magical, almost like speculative fiction way of telling stories. The Night Circus is a book about a magical circus of dreams. These 2 people that are forced into a bit of a magical competition of sorts and a bit of a rivalry. If you want a story that is tangible, that engages all of your senses in its descriptions of the circus, of the food there, all the different smells, it's just very, very transportive. You can feel like you're there. Definitely slower, definitely a non-linear plot, and again, a very specific, very like overly magical way of writing that I don't think is for everybody, but if that does sound good to you, then definitely check it out. The Starless Sea I think is my favorite of the 2. This is a book about stories and characters who love stories, stories about stories, stories that intertwine and wrap around each other and sometimes connect, sometimes don't. You're probably going to be confused for most of this book, and you kind of start to understand things towards the end, but also not really. You have to be okay with being a little bit lost for this book, I think, but it's so magical. There's folklore and fairy tales, underground hidden libraries and symbols and magical doors, just all that kind of stuff. The Spell Shop by Sarah Beth Durst is perfect if you love cozy fantasy, specifically that kind of almost Animal Crossing, living in a cozy cottage type setting. Our main character, who is a librarian, moves to her home island and starts a jam/spell shop, meeting all these different magical creatures, finding her place in the world. Super, super cozy, very, very kind of light and easy to read. Not a huge plot, but enough to keep you entertained. This book also did just come out with a sequel that I'm very excited to read, hopefully soon. Uprooted by Naomi Novik is another Eastern European inspired kind of folklore story. This has such a nice kind of vintagey fairy tale feel, a little bit of a Rapunzel storyline, other kind of wizardry things happening. If you love that feeling of like a classic vintage historical fairy tale, then this is definitely for you. If you love books about forests and books that take place in forests, then The Wild Huntress and Into the Heartless Wood are some of the most transportive books you will read. This one definitely has a bit of an autumnal feel. It follows around a magical hunt competition that's happening, which I believe is a retelling of a Welsh fairy tale, and this is a Welsh folklore inspired story. You can smell the damp leaves and the feel of the moss as you read this. It is just a story for people who love forests and everything that takes place in a forest. A fairy aspect as well, a very interesting character dynamic. I really, really enjoyed this one. Into the Heartless Wood definitely has a bit of a sadder feel. I think we follow 2 different characters, a boy and a forest siren, who unexpectedly meet and kind of deal with this whole man versus nature dynamic. Definitely some beautiful descriptions of the forest, but also a bit of like that kind of scary, eerie description of the forest as well, which I think is really interesting to read about. The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, a classic. Everyone loves this book for good reason. If you love reading about found family, cozy witchy things, grumpy librarians, seaside cottages, this is for you. The City of Stardust by Georgia Summers. If you love that, again, that kind of almost like speculative, existential, overly magical writing of Erin Morgenstern, but not a super strong plot, then I think that you would really enjoy this one. I don't think this one had a particularly good plot or particularly likable characters, but it was very, very, very magical, again, with hidden doorways and secret libraries and all that kind of stuff. Not the best plot, but it was so fun to read and so, so, so magical. Green Teeth by Molly O'Neill. If you love folklore and fae and a bit of a historical feel, this book has found family, the most beautiful nature descriptions, traveling through the English countryside, the Welsh countryside, the Scottish Isles, fairies and quests and adventures. This book has it all. And finally, the Love's Academic series by India Holton. Definitely the more ridiculous side of things. Like, this is a very overly silly style of story that I don't think is for everybody, but if it is for you, then it is so much fun. It has a bit of that natural history feel as well that Emily Wilde has, because we're following around natural historians. In this one, these two ornithologists, and in this one, two geographers. The characters in these books end up going on magical quests of sorts and adventures, and it's just a whole lot of fun. Okay, I think that is it for all of my whimsical recommendations. Definitely let me know if you've read any of these books, what your thoughts are, and also what recommendations you have for me, because I'm always looking to read more whimsical fantasy. I think whimsy and magic are always things that I'm trying to add to my life, and I think potentially the best and easiest way you can do that is through stories. So I'm hoping that you got some good recommendations in this video to add a little bit of magic to your life. But I think that is pretty much it for this video. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you got some books to add to your TBR. If not, just had a nice time listening in to a magical bookish chat. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being here, and I will see you in my next video very soon. Bye!